Alrighty. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Taming Your Sales Crocodiles. So, we did this once before and thought it would be good to do a little refresher. This journey began for me about a year ago, and it all began with this man and this book. And we did a coaching session together and a series of coaching. And, if you know anything about me, Carson Heady, I typically like to reach out and, take what a lot of people have as regular experiences and take them to the next level. And that's exactly what I tried to do in this case, was reach out to my co-host here, Hylke Faber, and just indicate how not only much did I get out of the time that we worked together, but also wanted to explore doing something greater. And here we are. So we've done some other projects together, but Taming Your Sales Crocodiles is really all about analyzing the limiting beliefs that we as sellers and we as sales leaders encounter on a regular basis. How do we identify them? How do we transform through them? And then how do we evolve as we assimilate new ways to identify, acknowledge, and overcome these limiting sales beliefs? So over the series, we're going to really explore a lot of our toughest challenges in selling and sales leadership, and how we can utilize these as growth opportunities, and to take that one step further to reach levels of excellence so that we can be our best selves and get past these areas where we would typically get stuck. So today, we were in a survey not too long ago, and it was really around where we as sellers see some of our greatest challenges. Is it kind of early stage, as we're doing preparation? Is it as we do prospecting and attempt to get the meeting? Is it the needs analysis and kind of building the momentum? Or frankly, is it just the sales grind, just coming back? You close a large deal, the scoreboard's back to zero. There's always an expectation. There's rising quota. That piece actually finished number 2. So we're going to analyze that in a future episode. But number one on the top list was getting the meeting and prospecting. So we're going to talk about that today, where we have limiting beliefs in prospecting and getting the meeting and going to market, because this is crucial. If we can't get the meeting, obviously no sales are going to transpire. So we actually have 3 activities in the Taming Your Sales Crocodiles. We've obviously got the podcast, which we will continue to bring this, deliver this content every month. And this is a call out as well. We'd love to get people to join the podcast as a guest. Whether it's you're open to being coached on your limiting beliefs in sales, or you want to tell your story about how you've acknowledged your limiting beliefs and overcome them. So that's a call out right there. We also have keynotes and kickoffs. So we're going to be doing a lot of those types of activities with teams, with organizations. We have sales team journeys as a part of that. So spending time with sales teams, and then also sales leader individual coaching. And then the other element is just the LinkedIn dialogue, polls, articles, content that you can see via our Taming Your Sales Crocodile page. So lots of stuff there. We threw out a lot of information here in the onset. We're going to dive into the content here in a moment. But Hylke, first off, welcome. And what are your thoughts? What are your reflections as we convene for episode 2 today?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be in this question of how do we bring our best selves to sales? And in a way, there's part of me that loves sales, and there's part of me that really doesn't like it. And at the same time, when I think about that, I notice there's so much about sales that has to come from within me, which is one of the reasons that I like thinking about sales so much, because it is about how do I bring my best self to every moment where the outcome is always uncertain. And I love that we have as a topic today, Carson, the prospecting and the getting the meeting part of sales, because so much of sales is about working with uncertainty. And what happens to our mind is when things go well, we're excited, regular mind. When things are not going well, we get depressed, to put it very black and white. We all know this, right? And so part of the work of a leader, of a human being, and in particular, if we're focusing on being a sales leader or a salesperson, is to move beyond that polarity and saying, yeah, there's some good days, there's some bad days, there's some winter, there's some summer. But where do I find the inspiration to keep going? And no matter what, and I'll be honest, part of my work, I run a company, Growth Leaders Network, is also drumming up new business. My clients are going through contraction. I had two client organizations that just laid off 10,000 people each, which also meant that some of the work that we are doing is being delayed. There was actually one client team that I just got a message from last week that said, yeah, we had an offsite plan for next Monday. We can't do it because there's no budget. We're working through layoffs. We're working through all of that. And, was I happy about that? No, because I like doing the work. I also like the revenue that comes from that. That was a superficial mind. And then I took a step back and said, Hilke, why are you doing this work? Why am I doing this work? And to me, that's a very important question. Why am I doing this work? Well, I'm doing this work because I'm deeply committed to bringing forth the best in each of us, no matter what happens, to connect to that true potential. Well, to be able to do that, if I run after my what I call crocodilian brain, which is always running after the polarity of good or bad, I'm lost. But when I look at this team and say, hey, yes, I heard you. You can't do the workshop because of budget constraints. Very simple example. But when I ask myself, what am I really here to do is to help people realize the potential, and in this case, to help them move through this challenge. So from that came the idea and said, well, you know what? You don't have budget. I already set aside the time. How about I offer you 90 minutes for free? And the team gets together and we sit through what it actually means that some of my colleagues are being laid off. And how do I find the wherewithal to actually stay focused on what I need to be focused on? Now, that is not prospecting in the purest sense of the word, in the normal sense of the word. But to me, that is part of prospecting, because prospecting to me is about sharing, being inspired, staying focused on what I'm here to do, no matter what happens. And that's the energy with which I enter into conversations. So, as we think about this, Carson, when you think about your challenges with prospecting and with getting the meeting, what are some of the challenges that strike you that are on your mind?
That's a great synopsis, Silka, and very timely topic as well, as I know a lot of sellers are facing some uncertainty and sales leaders right now facing some uncertainty. So I'm going to apply a lens that I think is relevant today, and I think I'll also apply a lens that just speaks to my history in selling. I've been very fortunate to be, playing the selling game for the past 20 plus years. And, as I like to say, I kind of cut my teeth in the cold calling and one call close environment. And then I've spent the better part of my career in the enterprise selling environment where, working with and trying to liaise with customer executives and build relationships, longer sales cycles. So I think I have a pretty good, foundation as far as, what our sellers are experiencing today and what they will be experiencing. I also always like to go back to the text. The subtext here is about unlearning fear and becoming a true leader. All of us experience fear and limiting beliefs at some point. And we have different ways of grappling with it, right? Some of us tend to try to push it down and just keep moving forward. Others, it becomes a little bit more noisy. Those crocodilian voices can become overpowering at times. But when I think about getting the meeting, I think about a number of things. I think you alluded to some of this. There's this, when you first get like a new book of business or a new account or whatever it is, a new year starts or whatever it is, there's this excitement, right? I'm thinking about all the all the people call it green field or white space, all the customer opportunities I could conceivably go after. We start to think about who should we talk to. We might inherit some relationships. Maybe there was a prior seller. Maybe there was another relationship that existed. So we can jump in and we've got kind of our, built-in leads a lot of times, or our referrals. And so a lot of times, I'm a big believer in probability and odds, which is why I don't gamble anymore. And I don't bet on sports, but I do apply probability and odds when it comes to selling. You're going to inherit these warm relationships. You're going to have a certain probability when you reach out to specific executives. I spent a lot of time really studying the science behind, getting the meeting. We can control three major things when it comes to prospecting: the quality of our message, the quantity of our outreaches, and then the consistency of our execution of prospecting over time. Getting the meeting, the fear around this is, hey, first off, am I going to be able to get the meetings that I need in order to be successful this year? If I have one account, 5 accounts, 10 accounts, 300 accounts, it's critical that I'm thinking about this in a way that I'm giving myself the best chance of success. Now, if you reach out, if you got one account, that could be an immediate fear of, hey, I've got a lot riding on what I do next. And that can be a limiting belief if you don't get the immediate response that you need. Sometimes we do things out of desperation in those moments of limiting beliefs, in those moments of fear. So we may send messaging to these executives that sounds like what every other seller is sending. And typically that's what gets our message deleted. That's what gets us maybe shunned or ignored. And so what I've found to be successful, and we'll talk more about this in the next part, is, modifying that, finding ways to stand out, finding ways to be unique, but relying more on the process that we know will help us, as opposed to succumbing to that crocodilian voice. Some of the other fears that I think we face when it comes to getting the meeting is, am I going to say the right thing in order to get in the door? We live in a time now more than ever where you really have to stand out and say something of extreme value, showing up with valuable perspective in order to earn the right to get to the table, to get to the meeting. And at every stage, we're earning the right to proceed. Ultimately, we want to earn the right as a salesperson or as a sales leader to be the trusted advisor, right? And so I think a lot of times our fears, where we will be limited up front, is, am I saying the right thing? I think a lot of sellers will overthink those steps. We can do all this prep work. We can spend all this time researching. And I remember years ago when I worked in a call center, I'd have people that would prep for 20, 30 minutes, an hour, just to make a cold call for no one to answer. And these types of things will continue to limit you because, again, you want to look at the ecosystem. If I make, 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 dials or 100 emails, what's my response rate? Frankly, you should be looking more at how can I enhance the value of the message that I'm sending so that I have a higher probability of getting that meeting. And I guess the last big one that I would say around the prospecting and the getting the meeting piece is, a lot of times, because we need different executives or different lines of business, it's that not really knowing how to show up. What should my message look like? Are they going to think I'm not worthy to get the meeting because I don't say the right thing? And so I think a lot of times we can second guess ourselves as well when it comes to getting the meeting. And I tell sellers all the time, frankly, the customer is the expert of their domain. You're the expert of theirs. So you can speak to the outcomes that you've driven in similar situations. You can speak to what you're learning from doing social listening or reading industry magazines, and you can show up with perspective. These are some of the things in my organization or that I'm doing. What are your thoughts on this? Or these are some of the ways that we've helped customers in similar situations. Does this resonate with you? Or how are you approaching this? Would love to discuss this type of approach. These are the types of things that will really help you get to the meeting. But I think these are going to be the big stumbling blocks, Hylke, when it comes to how should I go to market? How should I show up? And how can I ultimately get the meeting with my intended audience?
When I listen to you, Carson, I hear in my mind this image show up as you're on a sports game field all the time, right? And you can prepare as much as you want, but you have to go with the play that's in front of you. So you have to stay in the moment and be fresh. And that's how you create the quality of the message, the quantity of actually the number of outreach you do, and also the tenacity of reaching out by basically staying in that. Because as soon as you leave the moment and you give into fear land, you end up over preparing or just knee-jerk reactions, sending boilerplate messages to people just to fill the quantity quota or whatever it was, and not really showing up with everything that you have to offer. So what I want to go a little deeper with you into Carson is, so maybe think about a specific situation where your crocodile might have gotten the best of you for a moment, you know, in prospecting, just like I was sharing in the example with me. Like when I got that email saying workshop is off, after I've gotten actually three other emails that were pretty much like that for the macroeconomic situation, I could feel in myself that crocodilian fear-based reaction going, uh-oh, and it's kind of catastrophic thinking. Now all is lost. All is lost. It's never going to happen. And I've been in this business for the last 15 years, so I know that is not true. I've lived through another recession before, and I know what that's like. And yet my mind goes there, right? My mind goes there. So my question to you is, what do you notice when you're there, and what do you do to get yourself out of that? Because what I did in that moment was I just noticed like you could almost feel the energy going like, like total contraction, right? And the thinking becomes very distorted, like not thinking that I want to be associated with, but thinking that I do have, so I have to got to deal with it, right? And then simply taking a breath and saying, what am I here for? When I look back at this moment, how do I want to remember this moment, if I remember it at all?
Yeah.
And then that goes back to like, what do I want to offer? And then it's exciting again. So now next week I have this free 90-minute workshop with this team, as one of the many things I'll do, but that's one of the things I'll do. And part of my inner being knows that that's the right thing to do. So tell me about like a challenge you've had prospecting, where your crocodile might have gotten the better of you. And just as you just tuned in, crocodile is our shorthand for when the not at your best of you gets you by the neck. When the fear-based beliefs start to take over, what happens with you?
Yeah, and it happens all the time. I mean, I look back in my career and I've had a lot of these types of scenarios where, I could have caved to the crocodilian voice. Hey, I've got to pick up the phone. I've got a cold call. I've got to dial. I'm dealing with voicemail after voicemail or rejection after rejection. What am I going to do next? Am I going to alter my approach, or am I going to stay the course? And then flash forward, even to situations in recent years where I've had very large enterprise customers. But you come in and you might get this preconceived notion where people will tell you, oh, hey, we've chased this customer, this deal for years. You're not going to get it. They'll never commit to this or that. And I've had multiple award-winning deals that have closed in those types of situations where I was told right out of the gate, you're not going to get anything out of this customer.
So pause for a moment, because you said people saying, nah, it's not going to happen. That sounds a lot like my crocodile, and probably our crocodiles are saying it's not going to happen. You have that voice in you, Carson.
Yeah.
So just describe to us for a moment, how do you recognize that voice and then not give into it?
That's a great question, because again, I think everyone has their own way of working through these types of scenarios. If I succumb to a limiting belief, how is that going to lead to my success as a salesperson, as a sales leader, as a guy trying to put food on the table for a family, right? So I can either succumb to this limiting belief, or I can choose to overcome the obstacle, go around the obstacle, or find a new approach. And I think that's the key element, right? Because a lot of times, if you do the tried and true way, or you do the cookie cutter way, or you do what somebody else tried and failed at before, chances are you're not going to find success that way. And so I think that's why I encourage sellers to always look at, how do you stand out? I do a lot of things very differently than a lot of other sellers out there. I've become known for how I've leveraged social selling. I work in a technology company, and I had zero technology foundation before joining it years ago. But my teams and I have been successful because of doing things differently. You know, we hear the problems that are presented from senior leadership. We hear that, hey, you're not going to get this deal for XYZ. And we take a different, unique approach. You dissect the problem, Hylke. You look at, okay, so we haven't historically been able to be successful here. Okay, first off, who are we working with? Who are we trying to talk to within these customer organizations? Are there other people that we should be reaching out to? Is there a different message that we should be reaching out with? Right now, you're not going to have a lot of success trying to call on customer executives, trying to sell them much of anything. You're going to have a lot more success if you're able to reach out to customer executives and figure out, how do we optimize costs? How do we realize more value in this time? How do we take out or consolidate some of the other costs that you have? You've got to be very cognizant of the climate and the message that's going to resonate with customers. But you can't just go through these, what I like to call, comfortable ways of mediocrity or comfortable ways of failing. If I hear you can't do it, well, there's a light bulb that goes off in me personally, where I get excited and I'm saying, hey, there's low expectations here. And if there's low expectations, then guess what? That's what sets up sellers to be heroes, is when you can look at a scenario where there is low expectation. You've got that no win or low probability of win scenario. And that's where you really can challenge yourself to get creative. I think a lot of great sellers look at it that way, is it's, how do you be a problem solver? How do you figure out if something hasn't worked before, how can you find that creative way to do it differently?
Great. I love that. I'm hearing you say this, you turn on the creativity. It's almost like when you hear outside or inside of you cannot be done, you're like, huh, oh, we'll see about that. No, I'm going to challenge myself and find other ways. Who have I not talked to? What other things can I focus on? What does the client really needs to think about right now? Or what are they thinking about? How I'm going to meet them there, and not, love that phrase, give into the mediocrity, the way of mediocrity, the way of failure. I think that's a very powerful pointer that you're pointing out there, Carson. So we can look at all of that and say, well, that sounds all good, Carson, but you have been doing that. You have won awards for it and all this stuff. But I'm listening to this podcast right now, and that's not where I'm at. I've I have my limiting beliefs. I have my fears. I have a lot of pressure. I work in a macroeconomic environment where everybody's saying that things are going the way that I don't want them to go. Um, Recession is even like a taboo word. You can't kind of say it, but it's in people's minds. What do you recommend? Like, how do you suggest people interact with that situation, especially when they don't feel it within themselves? And as you think about that question, I just want to give my own reflection on that. And that is where I started the podcast today, is to really think about the why. You know, many of us get a job in part because we need to provide food on the table and to make some money. And that is a totally fine reason. It's not going to be the reason that's going to make you successful, because money comes and money goes, as we all know, right? It's an energy. And we need to learn how to work with that energy and not be slaves to it. So when the energy goes the other way, just like the sea, the water of the ebb flowing out, am I going to panic, or am I going to use that time to look at what's on the beach, like what's really going on with me, like what is really my why, what am I here to offer, what do I want to what I want to this I'm here in this life for so few years. What do I want to dedicate this moment to? Do I want to focus it on worrying away my precious time about what might happen? Or am I going to be the best and find ways to be creative? So, Carson, say more about what would you would say to a person that's kind of down in the dumps, to put
Yeah.
it irreverently.
It's easy to get there. And I want to hone in. So, Brandon, thanks for being on. Brandon said, improvise, adapt, and overcome. You have to constantly be changing and updating your strategies. And it's so true. It's all in how you react and respond to situations. I made a post actually today. One of my favorite songs, it's actually my wife's and my song, is this song called Soldier by Gavin DeGraw. And there's this line, I proposed to her during it at a concert. Gavin was in on it. Pretty cool story. But there's this line in there that it's funny how life gets hard at the last moment when you're supposed to charge. And it's so true, because we always have the best laid plans, right? But things never, ever, ever go the way that we foresee, or that you get to final throws of a deal, right? You get, very close to the end zone and you get stopped. There's always a blocker. There's a surprise. There's this gotcha or this aha moment. And it's what we do in those moments that's going to define us. Do we get down in the dumps? Do we freak out? Do we, go into a desperation mode, or do we reset, recalibrate, shrink our bubble, think about what are our core fundamentals? What do we need to do to get through this moment, to your point? And I think that's what sets apart great sellers. These things happen to me all the time. They happen to me all the time. My team and I are very successful. We do a lot of great things. We, run into these scenarios a lot where there are these gotchas and these aha moments, but it's what you do in those moments that really defines you. And, even looking at the current economic climate, during this time, what can we control? You go back to the big three of what you can control: the quality of your messaging that you send out to people, quantity of outreach, consistency of execution. You control these things. I control what messaging I show up with. I'm saying something different when I'm reaching out to a customer executive today than I was last year, the year before that, and the year before that. We were in a pandemic, and the outreach then was really all about, how can we help? We're here. How can we help? Wasn't trying to sell anything. So what I recommend you do is control how you show up with the relationship, creating relationships, nurturing relationships, investing in relationships. And even in a economic downturn, in a pandemic, or even just in a situation of normalcy, or in a massive change in one specific industry that you support, you control how you show up. So my encouragement would be, look at the parameters. You made the sports metaphor earlier, Hylke, and I do look at sales very similar to sports. You've got to get the lay of the land. It's like you're playing in a different baseball diamond. You've got to understand the little nooks and crannies and all the little variables that are going to impact how you show up and serve, but also what your clients, what your customers are going through. And the better you understand those things, the more you can address how you approach the situation. But even in tough times, customers still need to do business. They still need to support their customers. They still need you to serve them. They just maybe don't know how. So adjust, recalibrate, and go do.
How you show up. And as I talk to you, Carson, I can't help but find the being sort of infatuated almost and inspired by the enthusiasm that comes along with that. It's like, like I'm on this field, this is what's happening right now. How am I going to show up to that? And that by itself, thinking about this question, how am I going to show up right now, gets you into a creative endeavor. It's like, like I could do the crocodilian, fear-based, stiff, rigid, not being giving my best, or I can reinvent what my best looks like right now, and I'll do that. And then it's like an experiment. Like, oh, I'm going to try this, and that's what I see. You also emphasize in this conversation, Carson, that yes, there's these three parameters about quality of message, which includes quality of your being, what you bring to it, quantity of outreach, and then the consistency of follow through and the tenacity of that. That can sound very dry. And at the same time, as you talk about it today, it is about really bringing your creativity to those three questions. How do I bring quality? How do I do quantity? And how do I follow through? And that may look very different today from the way it was even a week ago. Carson, anything you want to say by way of closing?
Absolutely. A couple of really great elements here that Brandy has called attention to. And I think in closing, I want to hone in on this one. How do you recognize that you're operating from a limiting belief and shift the focus? Because I think that really summarizes where we are, whether it's getting the meeting and prospecting or at whatever stage of your selling journey that you're on. Because I think there's a lot of times where we hear that crocodilian voice. You can't hit that quota. You can't get that meeting. You can't get this deal closed. You can't get off this performance plan. You can't rebound from getting, this situation, or you can't get that promotion. These things can happen all the time, and they happen to all of us. And I think it's key to point out that you can recognize that it's happening anytime that you're hearing you can't do this, or when you hear yourself formulating an excuse as to why you can't do something. I can't hit my quota because it's unrealistic. There's not enough opportunity out there. I can't get the meeting, or I can't break into this customer because they won't engage. It's not correct. You just have to find the way. And I have so many stories in my career of situations where there were customers that wouldn't engage, or I couldn't get the first meeting, or I couldn't get the 5th meeting request or the 10th meeting request. So I just made the 11th and 12th. I went around some of those influencers and got meetings with other people so that I almost created this groundswell. There's always a way. So those are some of my key takeaways when it comes to limiting beliefs in getting the meeting, but also in the sales journey all up. We want to thank you. We want to thank you for joining us today on this journey. We want you to be part of the journey. Share your stories. And if you're open to being coached on one of these episodes, please, by all means, reach out to Hylke, reach out to me, reach out to the page, because we'd love to welcome you. Our next podcast, we're doing these once a month on the 3rd Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And we're also going to have sales leaders that join us in future episodes. So please reach out and be part of that group. If you have any recommendations on some great speakers, people that you want to see on the show, let us know. We would love to accommodate in that area. And then lastly, if you're interested to learn more, or you want to think about how taming your sales crocodiles could be applied with your team, your organization, let us know. That's what we're here for. We are here to together tame the sales crocodiles that can plague us all. So join us for the podcast. Reach out about sales kickoffs and keynotes that we're doing, especially right now. We're in the first quarter of the year, so it's perfect timing for that type of work. And sales team and sales leader coaching. We're eager to engage with you and your team. Hylke, take us home.
Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. I'll leave you with this question, which is, how do I show up when part of me does not want to? All right. Happy crocodile taming. Great to be with you. And I will see you next month, and on Taming Your Sales Crocodiles LinkedIn pages, or if you want in a keynote or a team sales journey or a sales coaching, whatever you'd like, you know how to find us on LinkedIn with Carson Heady and myself, Hylke Faber. See you next time.
All the best.